that in the case, the data doesn't mean very meaningful result. And next, find and develop available fund resources. This came from, we have to contact the government or private sector and other available funds. And next is including waterbird sensors into agenda. Well, we have a lot of big and small scale agreement and conventions, such as LAMSAR, CBD, CMS, and sometimes regional and transboundary cooperative programs. For example, the ESPEC, ASEAN project. And some countries have bilateral agreement. For example, Korea and China and Japan. So we need to use this kind of measure to put our waterbird sensors into agenda. Well, this is the result of the waterbird sensors. And the coverage in Korea is like this, but we have developed to 192. Well, you can see there are still many gaps. Gray heron, as you see, we are abundant of gray herons in many sites, but there are some white blobs. So, the waterbird and the future plus. The plus can be science and minus fun and cooperation and coordination. And also you can say literature, economy, music, well-being, green politics, and etc. So the plus is yours. You can choose and you can change the waterbird and the future. Well, the purpose of our activity is to keep the waterbird keep living in the wild, not keep them in the museums. Well, unfortunately, Nick is not here. Nick was supposed to be here, but the Teddy is here. My last thing is very nice photo. Keep on going. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim, for that presentation. Certainly, he's one of the most cooperative people that I've ever worked with. He's very supportive of a lot of the activities that we do, and he also coordinates very well with a lot of colleagues. And what we're hoping is for your cooperation in supporting this motion now. We have 15 minutes left. We did have a panel planned, but I think that perhaps the best way to go is to actually invite comments on the presentation, any of the presentations, and maybe we could probably start with the potential panelists to see if there's anything they want to add to the presentations. So we have panelists from BirdLife International and from Wetlands, and we did have Nick, but unfortunately he's not here from the Ramsar Secretariat. So maybe Christy, if you wanted to start off by making a few comments on the presentations.
Okay. I think just to say that data is very important, but the people who come out with those data are really the most important part of the equation in terms of getting the motivation to actually do the work for this type of activity. So as you know, they have all mentioned, it depends a lot on people who are interested to do this work. And so raising the awareness and raising the capacity and interest of ordinary people, and this is something that we can do and everybody can do, and it's not rocket science, so to speak. Despite the graphs and the complicated equation that has been presented, even if it's CO2 or 2CO. In fact, on the ground, when we go out in the field, it's not rocket science. It's basically very simple to impart. So I think a question for us would be, how do we grow this army of people who will keep on filling those empty gaps in the places that needs to be monitored.
Thank you, Christy. I think you're absolutely right. We have a growing army out there, and we need to harness that army so that the information that they provide can actually be used in an effective way. Thank you for that intervention. Now, Ward Hagermeyer from Birdlands International will have a short comment.
Thank you. And thank you, Christy, for addressing that very important part of the equation, the basis for everything, the gathering of the data, the fun, the participation in the field, and really appreciating these birds. And then making sure these bird data end up in databases that can actually be used. And that's the part of the equation that I want to stress a little bit, because the title of this session is actually International Cooperation for Waterbird Monitoring, and the very important last bit of the sentence is to support sound management. We're doing this to have fun, but we're also doing this to make sure that our waterbirds stay alive and survive and will be there for future generations as well. And this means that we have to look at well, what's happening to these birds, and we saw some quite alarming pictures, and especially Asia came out quite alarmingly. We also can conclude from what we saw there that there's better statuses of these birds in, for example, Europe and the Americas. And this is not for nothing. We also saw that the monitoring of data of birds was better there, and there is a link between the status of these birds and the fact that the monitoring is better, and that is that we have actually seen quite effective conservation efforts in both the Americas and in Europe. And that has resulted in some better conservation statuses of these waterbirds. So that's a very good example of actually showing how relevant this work can be and how important it is to make sure that the data that we all gather through these censuses end up with those that need it. You heard about the migration crisis in Asia, and the main driver of that being loss of habitat, changes of habitat. And the driver of that change very often is development. Stakeholders in causing and allowing that development are the governments that in their planning need to make sure that the wealth of people is ensured and plan these activities in certain places. We need to make sure that our data reaches those people in the government that can then use it to do effective planning and setting aside, or at least protecting, those areas that are so vitally important for these migratory birds. Another group that is involved in development and driving change is business. And we need to make sure that our data can be used by them. They need to do impact assessments. And then very often they do not reach out to the data that is available because it's somewhere hidden in reports or in databases. We need to make sure that tools are created that allow them to, and not only allow them, but actually make it impossible for them to not use that information. They will have to use it, and then they can take it into account in their development plans. And they can avoid the most valuable places. Or when they have to work there, they can actually take measures into account to avoid the worst impacts. We need to work with local communities that very often have use of areas where these birds occur as well. And traditionally this is often in harmony, but with accumulative pressures around them, we can often see conflicts occurring as well. So we need to also reach out to the local communities. So it is very important that all the data that we have end up in mechanisms that allow them to be used. And reporting is one way, and we saw Tage list a lot of use of the data at various levels, from conventions down to the site level itself. But we have to make sure that at each of those levels the mechanisms actually exist so that the data can be used and go into decision making. It's a critical point. So yeah, once more, we can be effective in achieving results, as we can see from some of the other regions, and let's hope that by mobilizing more support for monitoring in this region as well, and through this motion we can reach out to all those members of IECM, that we can make the monitoring stronger in this region, and that by a few years, maybe 10 years, we can also see that the status of waterbirds are going to become better in this region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, your comments reminded me that, you know, originally coming from Europe, that the Birds Directive of the EU is a very powerful policy instrument that really depends on really good quality data, but at the same time it creates a demand for the creation of that data and strengthened monitoring systems that feed back into the policy decisions. So I think, you know, in terms of linking the policy to the data collection and to the use of data, that's quite a good example. We have about 10 minutes, so I would welcome any comments from the audience on the presentations or on anything related to the ocean.
Thank you very much. My name is Hasna Moudud. I'm from Coastal Area Resource Development and Management Association in Bangladesh. I have moved from trying to save the Royal Bengal tiger to saving Pacific reef egret. I'm new to it, but I do understand that the red list, the IUCN red list, makes it threatened but not critically endangered. Whereas this bird is very rare, and I located a pair in 2008, and then in 2010. I'm sorry, and I revisited in 2011. And because I'm not a bird expert or a bird watcher, so I took a team of cameramen, and I invested all my money in filming all the birds in St. Martin's Island. Bangladesh is only a coral island in the remote Bay of Bengal. And to our great surprise, we have found the black spoonbill, the tern, and a pair of the Pacific reef egret, because we didn't know which one was the reef egret. Hundreds and hundreds of birds flocking there. But when they took off, we could clearly see after the way the birds moved to make space for the Pacific reef egret. It was unbelievable, astonishing that they made way and the two birds flew very gently. So I would like to have more information and cooperation, and I'm willing to offer my services to the bird watching census so that we have more information. And also we need very strong statement against developing countries building an airport like in Bangladesh, or building a deep sea port without considering very important migration routes. I hope that you will give these advance warnings to our countries, you know, and the donors in particular who will be providing money for the deep sea ports, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that interesting story. Yeah, I think that we do have to pay a lot of attention to these developments, and most of them do require environmental impacts assessments. But sometimes I find these impact assessments actually say, well, you know, there's not enough data, we don't have the right data. And sometimes that's because the data is missing, and in your case you can provide that kind of data through new surveys. But in other cases, data is actually there, but it's only being selectively used. So we have to, you're right, I agree with you, we have to keep up the pressure and make sure that the developers know that this information is available and, as Ward said, needs to be used in the decision-making process. Any more comments?
Thank you. Silvana Brown, Canada Canadian Wildlife Service, and co-chair of the North American Waterfowl Management Plan. Excellent presentation, very interesting. A question and two comments. The question, I think a challenge we all have in each of our flyways or region is monitoring methods and technology for shorebirds. I don't think, we certainly don't have an answer in North America, and I would appreciate engaging in dialogue on how we develop more adequate and affordable techniques. Moving to the two comments, definitely the need for data, I could not agree more. You talked about making decisions and making, a gentleman was making comments about how we make the data available to decision makers. I think something to keep in mind too is how much do we put of our investment do we put in monitoring versus actions. In the end, data itself is just data. What we want is conservation. So it definitely is important also to have some level of investment in action. And third point, in terms of where do we get support, and sadly that's something we see in North America, there is a significant change in the support we're getting. We come from a support mainly from the hunting community, and it was very, very important in the progress we've made on some of the waterfowl. However, this is changing for the good. We do have a lot of support from other type of groups, specifically when we talked about environmental goods and service coming from wetlands. So we have a lot of interest from people interested in managing floods and water, and they're coming to us because we're experienced in protecting wetlands. So that's a new part. Very interested in hearing your comments and how the dynamic is working here, because I think we can learn from your experience as well. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't quite get the question at the beginning that you wanted to answer. I got the comments, and I think that it's very important to, I mean, the whole ecological service part of it and the ecological valuation is something that's also we're looking at when it comes to the tidal mudflats, because the birds are there. We want to save the migratory birds, but by saving the migratory birds, we're also, got to demonstrate that there's other ecological services for coastal protection, for livelihoods, for ecotourism. And that is a very powerful tool, and we're starting to do studies, related to that right now.
Maybe I can use the opportunity to respond to your question about methodologies for shorebird monitoring. This information is available. There are very good techniques to do that, and I'm happy to speak to you immediately after this to provide you the information that you seek. And more and more these methodologies are available online, so I can provide you information on that.
Thanks, Tish. Any more comments?
I want to hear about Pacific Reef Egret, some information.
I'd be happy to talk to you about that immediately after this meeting as well.
You can share.
I don't know if we have time for that. I think we better see whether other people have questions.
Okay, let's see if there are other comments, and if there are no other comments, we'll address it now. If we use up the time, then maybe what you can do is meet with George afterwards. I'm also interested to know about the Pacific Reef also. So let me ask first if there are more comments or more questions. Yes. Okay.
Thank you. My name's Tim Stowe, BirdLife partner in the UK, the RSPB. I was very impressed by the presentations, and can I just encourage all those folk here from the East Asian Flyway not to lose heart, but to continue all the efforts to build up the volunteer support for monitoring. In the UK, we live on a rather small island with a rather large number of people, so we are very lucky in having many volunteers, but we've probably got some interesting experiences to share in how to build large numbers of volunteers. Several people have made some of the points that I would make, but perhaps I could pick out a couple. Years ago, when all this started, one of the big difficulties we had was getting the volunteers to provide the data in the first place. They collect it and keep it. So we developed systems that made it easier for the volunteers to get the data to the organisers. Of course, now you guys start with a massive advantage over us 40, 50 years ago with the internet and the mobile phone network. So if you're going to develop your systems, think about developing things that you can use from a mobile phone so that the counter can record the data and send it directly to you from his phone or her phone. We've also found that the use of volunteers to make or enjoy themselves has been another major driver. We do something called a big garden bird watch. It's a very English sort of thing. People count the birds in their back gardens one Sunday afternoon in winter. We've had over 600,000 people participating. Now, most of those people aren't really conservationists, so the effort that they're giving isn't taken away from other pieces of work. It's done primarily for their enjoyment, but it's a fantastic example of citizen science. With that huge number of samples from across the UK, you can really start to produce trends. And we have those data now for 25 years, enormously valuable. So trying to find ways in which you can make collecting data fun and exciting for people who otherwise don't get involved in birds or bird conservation. And I guess the other issue for which we need careful consideration